Hey guys, Pineapple here, finally home from Anime Expo, and now that I'm back, it's time for me to fill you in on what went down in the episodes that we saw at the My Hero Academia Season 4 premiere, just like I would any other episode. There are some differences here, and I want to save my thoughts on the actual look of the show for another video, but let's talk about the My Hero Academia Season 4 premiere and explain what went on in this two-part video after that intro. Hit it! Okay, so the second half of the episode that we were shown at Anime Expo was based on Mirio and Deku's friendship, leading to new opportunities for Deku to grow. If you want to know what happens in the first half of the episode, and trust me you do because it involves some ridiculous villain versus villain action, then click on the card in the top right to go to my video explaining that, and then click back here. Originally, it was decided that the first year internships would be cancelled, but they ultimately decided to allow the students to take their internships because they needed the experience, and being sheltered won't help them become brave heroes. The list that the students can choose from is smaller, but the first years are allowed to pick an agency that has a good track record and train under those heroes for a set amount of time as part of their hero training. When Deku finds out about the internships at the end of Season 3, Gran Torino tells him that the logical place for him to spend his internship is at the agency of All Might's former sidekick. Deku's face lights up when he hears this like he's about to have an absolute geek meltdown, and he goes to All Might asking him to introduce him to Nighteye for an internship, but All Might denies him. He tells him that he doesn't think the students should be taking their internships right now at such a dangerous time, and Deku should be spending time developing his shoot style even further instead of trying to go off on some internship. There's actually a decent bit of comedy in this scene and throughout the Deku and Mirio section that actually keeps it really light and happy, even when things get a little serious later on in the episode. I think they did a really good job of having the other teachers eavesdropping on All Might and giving their takes in the background without making it feel awkward. All Might tells Deku that there are 3 reasons that he won't introduce him to Nighteye, and it basically just sums up to All Might being too embarrassed to face him because All Might didn't listen to him. And to understand why those words hold weight, hold on a bit because I'll be talking a little bit about why at the end of the video. Deku gets sad at being denied, but then All Might tells him to bring Mirio to an office room for a meeting. Mirio geeks out at the fact that All Might is calling him for a personal conversation, and All Might tells him that it's because Mirio has been interning under Nighteye and has been for an entire year. Because of that connection, All Might asks Mirio if he thinks Nighteye would allow Deku to intern at his agency. All Might says that he can't do it himself, but ultimately Mirio ends up asking Deku what kind of hero he wants to be. Deku starts to remember the various things that inspire him. He thinks of his mom and says that he wants to be a hero that never worries anyone. He thinks of All Might saving those kids in that one video that he watched a bunch when he was a kid, and he says that he wants to do it all with a smile on his face. He thinks of a few other things to add on to his answer, like having a flashback of his fight with Bakugo and saying that he wants to be the kind of hero that always wins. And then he finally turns and he tells Mirio that he wants to be the best hero of them all. Mirio sees the scars on Deku's arms and his clenched fist, and at the very least, it shows him that Deku is an incredibly hard worker, so if his goal is to become the best hero of all time, then he'll definitely work tooth and bone to get it done. Mirio tells Deku that he'll introduce him to Nighteye because he doesn't really have a reason not to, but ultimately it's up to Deku and Nighteye. The two of these guys are already like little brother and older brother, and we get some more of that later on in the season definitely, but even All Might is seeing it as he sits there and watches them banter and go back and forth like he's not even there. All Might looks at the two of them talking and he sees Mirio's bright smile and thinks back to before the events of Season 1. In this flashback, we see All Might talking with Principal Nezu. On the table is a page, and Nezu is talking to All Might about his successor. He tells All Might that amongst the students, there's one that's a worthy candidate to take on All Might's role. He says that the student doesn't have great grades, but he has a sort of aura that brings up others and makes others smile and laugh. As All Might looks at this hero with a smile that'll never be exterminated, he thinks about how Mirio would have been right in the middle of his hero duties right now, equipped with One for All, if he hadn't met Deku. Now this is a revelation because man does that suck for Deku from an outside perspective, right? Deku has always been insecure about himself, and he's finally given a quirk by the person who he thinks is the most amazing person ever, and then we find out that One for All could have gone to Mirio, who is a much better character to probably have One for All, especially at the beginning of the series when you think of everything that he could do with the quirk and really look at it from an objective standpoint. I think people like to use this as a negative point against the series that All Might should have given One for All to Mirio, Mirio because Deku is a crybaby or something, but Horikoshi created both of the characters. Horikoshi created the character crisis here. Yes, Mirio is one of the most likable characters in the series to a lot of people, and he's very similar to All Might in ways, and he has a great story of overcoming adversity like Deku does. He'd have been a great symbol of peace, but Horikoshi is the one who sets that up in the first place. He knows that a lot of us think that Mirio is better. What he decides to do is to turn that into a plot point in the actual series, but we'll get into that in a second. So Mirio and Deku walk to Nightaye's agency, and this is awesome because again, the two of them share a super genuine conversation where Mirio explains to Deku that Mirio has to lead by example because he's Deku's upperclassman. There's a nice shot of them walking up some spiral stairs, while Mirio explains to Deku that he has to make Nighteye laugh. Right as we get to the door, it's obvious that this is the end of one of the 2 episodes that we were showing that were edited together, but after that we cut to Nighteye scaring Bubble Girl and putting her in a tickle device, weirding Deku out. Nighteye stares at Deku and it just looks really cool, like a lot of the intense shots in these episodes did. Deku gets scared, but it's time for him to make his move. He changes his face to match an All Might face, and I believe he made a joke or something, and Nighteye was not amused. He tells Deku that the wrinkles were off and asks if he was trying to disrespect the name of All Might, to which Deku timidly answered, "No." Nighteye tries to kick Deku out, but Deku reminds Nighteye of a certain incident that happened a long time ago that Deku remembers as one of his favorite All Might rescues. Deku was copying the face from this specific rescue, and of course, Nighteye recognizes that and starts a conversation with Deku. The conversation turns to what Deku's planning to gain from the internship, and Nighteye is telling Deku that pretty much this is more of a job than anything, which could make him miss school and fall behind the other UA students. Deku goes on and on about how he can grow from working under All Might's sidekick and how valuable that'll be, especially for his development. And Nighteye does sit down, seeming like he's just about to stamp Deku's form to let him join the agency, but could it really be that easy? Of course, Nighteye stamps the table instead of Deku's paper and tells him that he doesn't accept him as a member of the agency and starts going off on Deku, explaining that Deku definitely would benefit from working in Nighteye's agency, but Nighteye's agency wouldn't benefit from Deku working there. He tells Deku that Deku himself is in charge of whether or not he can make it into the agency. All he has to do is stamp the paperwork himself. But the caveat is that Nighteye is holding the stamp and Deku has to take it from him. I personally thought this was really enjoyable because it was definitely like Horikoshi was making a reference to the bell test from Naruto, which is really cool. Deku activates his quirk and lunges after Nighteye, but he does a really bad job at trying to grab the stamp. Nighteye sees all of his movements and even starts telling Deku exactly what moves he's gonna make, and that's when we get Nightaye's quirk information, which is styled like it is in the other seasons, where the screen freezes on a character and the colors change and it shows their name and quirk. Nightaye's quirk, Foresight, lets him actually see into the future. Now we won't get too deep into it because there's actually a bit to unpack here with this quirk, but his quirk lets him touch a person and see an hour into their future. This means that if he hits you or even just kind of brushes past you, it's impossible for you to surprise him for the next hour because he can use his quirk to look forward to what you're gonna do. I'd imagine that it actually kind of works like Sharingan, with Nighteye looking slightly into the future of Deku's movements to easily avoid them, but that's just a theory of mine. Nighteye tells Deku that he has a minute left and he has no hope, and then Nighteye gets pretty mean, to be honest. He tells Deku that this is a waste of their time. He had hoped that Deku would be interesting because Mirio himself went out of the way to introduce him, but Deku is plain. Boring even. He doesn't have the spirit or heart to carry on the will of someone like All Might, according to Nighteye. Nighteye tells Deku that Deku is the wrong person to inherit One for All, and All Might chose wrong. He should have chosen Mirio like originally planned, and Deku should realize that he's no All Might and won't ever be All Might, so he should just pass the quirk on to Mirio and stop interfering. Whoa, wow. Deku's mind starts racing at 100 miles a minute, thinking about how Nighteye knows this even though he and All Might aren't in contact with each other, and questioning if Mirio knows about this and why All Might never told him about it. But it's not a question of whether or not it's true, it has to be true. Of course there was someone else besides Deku that All Might was looking to pass the power onto, but even though that's obvious, the thought still hurts Deku's feelings. This is the beginning of that really important character arc for Deku that I mentioned earlier in the video, because he looks up to Mirio almost like a big brother and sees how amazing he is, and I think even all of us can see how bright and happy Mirio is and how much that makes him like All Might. Horikoshi wants us to see that Mirio is the most like All Might because he is, and maybe he's even the best person to have gotten One for All, but this is Deku's story. Deku has to come to terms with the fact that he's the one that got the power, and he's the one that's gonna have to use it to change the future and become the greatest hero of all time. This means that he has to surpass All Might, Mirio, and everyone else that he thinks is amazing and thinks that he can't compare to, but he's insecure about himself still in his decision for good reason. His dream to become the greatest hero is a long-term one, and while it isn't a selfish dream because he wants to save people everywhere, it starts seeming pretty selfish if villains are starting to rise up and take over and become a major threat, and there's someone that he could give the power to give the world another symbol right now when they need it. That's the struggle that Deku is having. He thinks that he isn't good enough, but he has to be. A lot of my favorite moments from this arc come from Deku getting it together and remembering that no matter what could have happened, he's All Might's successor and he's the one that has to break the walls down towards peace. If he's inadequate, then fine. He'll have to spend time working out those inadequacies instead of crying and complaining about them because he needs that time. The portion that we got to see at Anime Expo ends with Deku powering up even more, and he starts to bounce around the room at massive speeds. It actually really resembles Gran Torino hopping around the apartment in Season 2, which is dope to see because it shows us the level of control over one for all that Deku has, which is enough for him to now bounce around and jump around a room and all of the surfaces to attack from any angle without actually damaging the walls, floors, or ceilings. He yells at Nighteye and says that he's gonna get that stamp, and he's going to join the agency, but unfortunately, that's where the premiere ended. Now, like I said earlier in the video, it definitely seemed to me like they took 2 episodes and cut them together to give us a taste of what'll be coming at the beginning of the next season. Expect to see Chisaki in his meeting with the League in one episode, with that episode ending at Deku and Mirio arriving at Night-Eye's office. The second episode will probably be the episode where Deku takes Night-Eye's test, and it might actually cover the first episode where we see Eri, depending on how much that episode covers. Hopefully this video gave you a good picture of what we saw on the hero side of the My Hero Academia Season 4 premiere at Anime Expo. Sorry it took so long to have these videos ready, it's been a crazy week since I got back and I've had a lot to unpack and take care of, but I'm glad I'm back. I got a wave of content that I was working on before the trip and some of that stuff is almost ready, so be here soon for more heat, and make sure to check out my video discussing what the villains were up to in the Season 4 premiere because it got pretty bloody. I'll see you guys later. This is Pineapple. Peace.